Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I went to RCHR to race on their AstroTurf track. I posted some racing videos, and I also posted a video of my thoughts and on how the RZ6 and my Laser ZX6 behaved on that surface. I've been thinking, I haven't been able to get back there in the past several weeks, but I will go back eventually, and I've been thinking about what kinds of changes I want to make to the setup on this RZ6 to allow me to push the car harder into turns. Because if you look closely at the race video that I have for this car on that track, you can see that the front end is really rolling a lot in corners, despite the fact that I have the stiffest front springs. I'm pretty sure that the stiffest ones, and I think 40 or 45 weight front oil, and I think either 4x1.3 or 5x1.2 hole pistons. So these are by no means soft shocks. Okay, I also have the lowest roll center setting in the front bulkhead. The highest roll center setting. The ball studs all the way down, and I was just thinking about how to get the car to roll less. So, I could surely maybe put even thicker oil in the shocks. Maybe I could stand the shocks up a bit, so go to the outer hole on the tower and or the inner hole on the arm. That would make the car roll a little bit less. I could perhaps add even more spacers under the outer ball stud here on the caster block. Maybe using a longer ball stud to support an increasing number of spacers that will increase the roll center a little bit further, creating geometric anti-roll. Those things might help a little bit. But I've noticed that the RC10B6 and also the Yokomo YZ2, they have an option for mounting a front sway bar. And some of the guys at at RCHR have a front sway bar on their B6. But Kyosho does not yet have a solution on the marketplace for either of the RB6 or 6.6 or the RZ6, which has the same front end with a front sway bar. And I've been thinking about whether or not there's a way to kind of custom assemble a sway bar setup on an RB6 type of front end. And there were a few things that came to mind about perhaps that have highlighted to me why they may not have parts for it or solution for it yet. So first, let's think about how the sway bars mount on the Laser ZX6. Okay, so this is a Laser, and the way the front sway bar mounts is you have the flat part on the front of the front gearbox, and the sway bar sweeps out towards the back and mounts into this little turnbuckle here, or this ball cup, and this ball cup pops into a piece on the back of the front arm. Okay, so the sway bar basically goes from front to back, and the whole thing terminates inside of the suspension arm. Okay, so as the steering servo swings and the steering link moves around, it doesn't hit the sway bar assembly. Okay, there's still clearance. But on the RB6, that's not the case. So if we look at, here is the back of the front arm, and this is your steering link. If I steer all the way, if I have any type of sway bar setup that has the flat part at the front and the sway bar mounts out towards the rear, it's going to collide with the steering link as the car is turning. Okay, so that's a problem. That basically means that the sway bar, instead of being mounted this way, has to be mounted this way. And if you look at the B6, at least the B6, their sway bar mounts like this, so the pointy ends go towards the front. So now we have to figure out how exactly we can enable something like that on an RB6 front end. And the first thing that came to mind, if I just kind of route this in and around a little bit, is maybe we can do something like this with the ends of the sway bar actually coming out above the camber link, and then you have some kind of ball cup to ball cup configuration, and you drill a hole in the arm and you kind of mount that link, if you will, like you know, this type of link here at the front of the arm. So you'd have to custom drill a hole here. Okay. So custom drilling a hole is not a problem. The problem is how to actually secure the sway bar behind the front shock tower. So to a first order, this fits almost perfectly. This is just a laser rear sway bar. So the width of the sway bar actually fits just about perfectly onto the rear of the front tower. So if there were a way to maybe, you know, drill some holes and put in these little guys here, right, that secure the sway bar, to mount those maybe in a top-down fashion onto this top brace piece, then you could actually hold this sway bar down and it would secure it in place, and then you could do the whole, you know, assembly at the front here, and everything may actually work okay. The problem is, if you were to actually drill through this front brace, you have to think about what you're drilling into. Okay, so let me remove this. And what you're drilling into is all of the space for the steering rack. So if you look, well, there may be enough space to do it, but if you look closely enough and you try to space everything out, there is probably not a whole lot of margin to really successfully do that. I may be wrong, but you can't drill holes at these ends here, because at these very ends, if you drill down, you're going to hit the steering post. Okay, so maybe you have to drill holes, you know, in between these left and right posts here. Okay, and if you do that, you know, maybe there's a little bit of space there, but it doesn't appear that way, especially as the steering link moves from left to right. There's also the actual link between the servo horn and the steering rack, and that, you know, moves around with the steering rack. So I think at full throw this way, that link there comes right up against this top brace, and it may collide with, you know, whatever you have. Like if you have two screws going down through this brace and then you secure them on the other side with maybe a nut of some sort, that may collide with this steering link. Okay, so you may not have enough clearance to really do things that way. The other option would be instead to mount the sway bar down low. And let me see if I can get this in. Maybe down here somewhere. Okay, so it exits between the camber link and the suspension arm, and then, you know, you do the same kind of ball cup setup up front here. You drill custom holes in the arms and you make it all work. But then how do you actually secure the back end of the sway bar? Oops, this is all getting a little messy here. Hold on a second. Okay, so how do I secure the back end of this sway bar inside, under the steering rack? So in this case, I'm doing something to secure it under the steering rack so it doesn't get in the way of the steering rack. But basically there's this, where's the part? Where did I put it? Here, right? So if I were to look at it this way, this is more or less how the front bulkhead looks. The flat end of the sway bar would be running up against this wall right here, okay, under the steering rack inside this whole assembly here. But where do I actually drill holes? Well, on this side and this side, these are for the steering posts. And then this hole right here is a hole for a screw that comes from the bottom of the chassis to secure the front bulkhead. So really you just have, if anything, this little space right here and this little space right here, where maybe you can drill two holes, okay, if you align it perfectly, and then secure something like these little guys onto this face here, and you secure the sway bar onto the face with those, and then you could probably make the whole assembly work. Okay, so I haven't actually tried doing that yet. I may consider giving it a shot if I can't get the front end to not roll so much without a sway bar. But I at least want to make a video sort of describing my thoughts here on this in case you're wondering about how to implement a sway bar setup on an RB6 or an RZ6 front end. That might be the way to do it, to come in from the underside, under the steering rack, up against the rear wall of the front bulkhead, and finding a way to secure the flat end of the sway bar on that face, and then having the sway bar come out to the front between the arm and the camber links, and then you secure it to the arm up here, and you just have to make sure you drill holes in the right spot. Now, of course, if you snap a front arm, then you have to, drill a new hole in the arm, in the new arm, when you replace the arm. So it would be a bit cumbersome. So I can only imagine that if Kyosho does ever release a front sway bar kit, if you will, it may have to include new suspension arms, because they'll have to, either put a hole, like a molded hole of some sort, in the front arm, or maybe redesign the arm to fit like a little ball cup, like what they have, I think, on the flat arms for the rear of the laser. It's just a little ball cup in the arm or a ball stud that the ball cup pops into. So something like that. So they need a new arm. They'd also need either of a new front cover here, or a new bulkhead assembly that allows you to explicitly mount the these little earpieces to secure the sway bar without getting in the way of everything. So either the bulkhead or the cover would have to be a completely new mold, and molds cost money. So that's probably why we don't have a front sway bar on the Kyosho buggies yet. But anyway, those are my thoughts on how to put a front sway bar in there. You're, of course, more than welcome to give it a try yourself and let me know how it turns out. I don't know if I will have enough time to get to trying this out in the near future. I have other projects coming up. But anyway, there you go. So thanks for watching.